please introduce yourself and your business with a few words about what your business does.
This is George Nicholson. I'm with the Telecommunications Industry Association. We go by TIA. We represent the telecommunications industry. We develop standards in the industry and run groups of interest, thought leaders in the industry. We've been around for over 40 years. I run IT at TIA.
Can you tell me about the specific problem you were looking to solve that led you to discover TeraTech?
When I arrived at TIA and did a quick look around at what we were using and how we were using it, I found a 20-year-old application that was written in ColdFusion. It turns out it was written by at least 3 groups of programmers, so there were at least 3 styles and 3 designs reflected in the source code in the database. Not being a ColdFusion even trained technician, I just did some self-teaching, of course, but had to reach out and find someone who could help me with it because, it's not perfect. It's because it's 20 years old, because every time we upgrade something, we get unusual results. And the code itself is not perfect. So when we hit an instance where we couldn't get through it, I needed someone I could lean on. And I turned to TeraTech. Did a search, found them to be well known in the industry, really good reputation around ColdFusion. And so their main office location that I found was in Rockville, Maryland. We're in Arlington, Virginia. They were close by. So I made the call, got introduced, and we went from there.
Thinking back to before this program was written, what were the main pain points of not having a solution to this problem?
Every time an unusual result would show up, the first thing I started doing was looking at the source code itself and trying to understand what it was trying to do and whether it did it correctly. And over time, I found that, that was probably not the perfect approach. I began to understand the database better and look at the data and the results of whatever the transaction was. That was very helpful because then I could zero in on the area that was causing the problems. But as I mentioned, the source code went through 3 generations of programmers, none of whom are any longer at TIA. And ultimately, you have to get to the source code and understand, why is it doing it this way? Should it be doing this way? And given the result I have, what are we going to do about the code? And that's where it all began. As time went along, TIA has lots of requirements, and I mentioned that we represent the telecommunication industry, and one thing that we do is issue numbers for CDMA devices. And though CDMA is quote-unquote a dying technology, just about every network in the world still supports CDMA. Almost any phone or device you buy will have the need to connect to a CDMA network, or at least be able to do that, and therefore needs a number. And we've been doing that entire numbering operation by hand. People were doing Excel spreadsheets, pieces of paper, deep sets of paper files. And somewhere around 6 or 7 years ago, they decided to write an application. So once again, a generation of programmers who were present then began down the path of building this application, and believe me, they got nowhere. And so we've, having had some experience with TeraTech, we asked about it. TeraTech got on with us, did a really good job of understanding what it is we were doing on paper and turning that into an application. And by the way, the people who run that at TIA are very particular and have taken, I think we're up on Scrum like 400 or something now. But the point is, it's immediately we hit the pavement running. We had an application all of a sudden that could do what we needed to do. And those Scrums are not about problems. They're about evolving the app. And so it's being used internationally now, and it's a key part of our revenue. Our revenue counts very heavily on that numbering scheme. So TeraTech was a key to our success there.
Did you try or consider any other options before you went with TeraTech?
We looked around. When we searched out TeraTech, we looked at least 3 providers. What I found often were international providers with, they would bring people on and off the docket as necessary. A lot of it was centered in places like India. And it just felt too arm's length. Now, TeraTech's also operating internationally. They have a lot of international employees, and at the same time, you always feel like they're part of your group. They get to know you personally. You have conversations with them frequently. They're almost always available for at least a discussion, and then we usually schedule work, and that's not hard to do either. So these folks are high quality, and I learned all that through, of course, the search process and talking to the various potential suppliers and going back and forth on, what's the scope and how do we get a proposal written and all of those kinds of experiences. And TeraTech just came through time after time.
At the point you decided to work with TeraTech, what were the specific doubts or concerns you had about going ahead?
The concerns are always the same. You don't know the people, and you get connected to people, and there are always communication problems because maybe it's a language barrier, maybe it's a culture barrier, maybe it's your personality not fitting theirs. So you always are concerned about that. And I found their team, we've experienced at least five different people, are always focused on the customer. And so it's a lot easier to build that bridge. The customers, I pride myself in being able to create constructive relationships with people, but at the same time, what's on the other end? Well, I found that on the other end as well. And so the personal relationships, and I don't mean down to knowing each other's families and things, just being able to communicate effectively and get a professional problem expressed. And when there's an issue, have everybody nice and calm. It's not about fault, it's about resolution. And I have found them to be professional across the board. Anytime I've had a new or different requirement, for example, Linux system administration, another place where I was never trained or had any experience, I gave TeraTech a call, and they came up with the right person, and that person has helped a lot when I've needed somebody to take a really hard look at a Linux server in terms of getting it configured in the first place, or determining why we're getting certain exceptions. Both times, those were really good engagements. So I get highly professional people that are easy to communicate with and therefore good problem solvers.
Can you describe the specific moment you realized TeraTech was working really well for your organization?
While we'd had some interactions and some focused conversations around exceptions and quirks in that 20-year-old system, the real breakthrough was, in fact, the application development, the numbering scheme I mentioned before. Watching that evolve, taking our end users who are, and one's quite experienced with computers, but not so much with software development, and the other is computer averse, and that's why he was doing everything on paper. Bringing that group to the table and getting an understood requirement and getting that requirement reflected on the screen and usable by even the person that's technology averse. So that's when it was very clear that we had the right team.
How successful your business has been with TeraTech?
As an example of just outstanding results, the application development scheme the process that we went through, it was clearly a demonstration of their capability. But as I mentioned, we have lots of unusual quirks with that 20-year-old system. So we might do something innocent like update MySQL. We might do something innocent like add a driver to MySQL. We might do something innocent like change PHP version. Anything we would do on a server could create an exception. And we had one really unusual, or two, I still have a couple, but we have a few unusual results when an upgrade like that happens. And I went around the world, the people that are responsible for the server, the people that are responsible for the OS, the people that are responsible for the ColdFusion engine, and so on, went around the world trying to solve that problem, and got on the phone with one of the TeraTech techs, and we had it knocked out in about 45 minutes. And this was after 2 weeks of struggle. So rather than go directly to the people who are in fact responsible. I have found that adding them to the picture earlier gets a result sooner, and it's usually correct.
Is there anything else about working with TeraTech that we haven't covered that you'd like to share, or even anything that we have covered that you'd like to expand on more?
I think the one thing I would say is that you're in good hands with TeraTech. You don't have to remember that they're out there. They're going to make sure that you remember they're out there. They follow up really well. They help drive initiatives. You open something up and it falls by the wayside because of other priorities. But TeraTech's always there ringing the bell and saying, where are we? What do we need to do next? We're missing something. It's been very helpful to have them help drive.
What would you say to anyone sat on the fence right now, not sure whether to work with TeraTech?
Well, first would be the question, what's your hesitation? But the convincer should be that you're going to get the results you're looking for. You're not going to miss the boat. If you have a problem to solve, if you have an application to develop, if you want to enhance something you already have, they will come through. That's what makes the difference. And so as you're sitting on the fence and wondering, am I making the right choice? The answer is yes. I found also that their rates are not the lowest in the industry. Guess why? Because they're very good at what they do. And so, you go out and you find these folks at a low rate, and you'll find they're using at least twice the hours and probably getting nowhere, as opposed to paying for really highly professional skill that brings things to closure quickly. Sometimes you don't even know what questions to ask. Trust me, they do. And so it's just an efficient way to operate. True professionals are always the best way to go.